Hey folks, welcome back to HeartGold vs Crystal. We are here at the final challenge, the champion of the Elite Four, Lance. We've met him before, and we knew that it would have to come to this eventually. Now, I stated in an earlier video that Bruno was the only member of the original Elite Four to retain his status as an Elite Four member. This is a true statement, because Lance was once an Elite Four member, but is now the champion. And that means he's all the more threatening, even though all of his Pokemon are lower level than they were in the original games. But whatever, I blame inflation. Anyway, he leads with a Gyarados. It's a classic strategy of leading with Pokemon with Intimidate in order to lower the physical attack of the opponent. Luckily, Klaus can compensate that with Swords Dance. Now, this fight, just for the record, went on for a very, very long time. So you will sometimes see a brief fade for a transition in order to get further and further along in the fight, because I'm essentially clipping out, repeating the same thing every turn ad nauseum, usually using Moon Milks to heal from some sort of dangerous hit. So that's going to happen a lot throughout both versions of this fight. Anyway, the strategy here was to get up Swords Dances. Thanks to that original Rock Tomb, I managed to outspeed the Gyarados now. Get up the Swords Dances and eventually take care of the Gyarados using Rock Tomb. And luckily that Dragon Pulse, when things are feeling cooperative, is a 3-hit KO. Although that's most definitely not guaranteed, it managed to work out for me in these situations. But that was the overall strategy. Luckily, his ability to use Dragon Pulse, his most powerful move, I think, is limited. Runs low on PP, and sometimes he just decides not to use it. And I take those opportunities when he uses something else in order to actually attack. Because otherwise, it's a question of how long I'm willing to wait for his PP to run out. And as you know, I'm a very patient man. But as you also know, I think full restores can go to hell. I think they are just incredibly annoying. I would much rather that they not be used. I mean, they essentially serve as a second health bar. You know how, like, other lesser RPGs, bosses will get extremely long health bars? Yeah, it's like that, basically. But it's just a matter of time until Klaus finally gets the luck and the perfect situation that he needs to take down this Gyarados. And I'm leaving in enough of the fight for you to, like, see what my overall strategy was, but overall, it's a lot of the same stuff. Anyway, I think at this point he's more or less out of Dragon Pulses, which means I can safely attack him. I mean, he was using Flail at extremely high health, it's just ridiculous and silly. So, feeling confident enough to throw in those Rock Tombs and finally get rid of Gyarados, hopefully. One more turn, wonderful. Now, if I felt like it, I probably could have gotten in another Swords Dance and made the whole process a little bit quicker, but oh well, this worked out fine, and it is the final fight, so I don't need to worry about conserving PP too much. Anyway, first person goes down. Next up is one of his 3 Dragonite. Lance is somewhat notorious for these Dragonite, all of which have evolved lower than the level that they're supposed to evolve at. Now, these Dragonite would have been a lot more manageable if Klaus had managed to get that Rock Tomb in, but unfortunately it missed. That would have made Dragonite slower, and that would have probably allowed Everett to outspeed him. But alas, such was not the case. Now, basically, all 3 of these Dragonites are handled in much the same way, despite their variations. Kind of like Claire's team, where her different Dragonairs had different elemental moves. These Dragonites likewise have, I think, Fire, Thunder, and Ice superpowered moves, like Blizzard and Thunder and those guys. But overall, the strategy that I'm going to use against them is basically the same. I'm going to send in Everett, I'm going to confuse it with Confuse Ray, and I'm going to whittle it the hell down. And that takes a while. One nice thing is that Everett has the ability Synchronize. I believe it's come into play before, and that allows me to inflict paralysis on the opponent when it tries to paralyze me. And Dragonite no longer has the Shed Skin ability that its pre-evolutions had, so that means it will be permanently paralyzed until it uses a full restore. But that means when I can heal up and get rid of the paralysis, that means Everett will outspeed, and that's just a nice little advantage. Now, these Dragonites are raised up a couple levels from the originals. I believe in the originals there were 2 47s and a 50, here we have a 48, 49, and a 50. Again, they're all handled in very much the same way, as you will see. Oh, look, it's another Dragonite. Wonderful. Now, his level 50 Dragonite is probably the most dangerous because he has Outrage rather than Dragon Rush, I think is the dragon move the other two have. And Outrage is, I believe, more powerful. It's essentially, it acts like Thrash. I think I've explained it before. The user runs rampant for a few turns, and then it gets confused. And ideally, it will hurt itself in confusion a whole bunch. And that's nice for me, because that means even if I'm too busy healing Everett from critical wounds, the Dragonite will eventually confuse itself, rather than having me use Confuse Ray on it. Of course, Outrage is still a very, very strong move. You can see by how much damage it's doing to the previously extremely durable Everett. Full 100 damage there. And yeah, that's this Dragonite in a nutshell. You could say something that it is more predictable, because it is locked into Outrage. You will know what's coming, and you can put something in that resists Dragon. But I guess that's like a Steel type, basically. I don't even remember which elemental move that this guy has, but anyway, after a long and arduous battle, finally get it down, and in a nice little fitting end, it destroys itself. But trust me, you did not want to see all that whittling. I'm just going to come out right now. If I had not edited down these fights, this video would have been over an hour. Something like an hour and 4 minutes. You did not want to see me using tons and tons of Moo Milks. Trust me. Anyway, here is the last Dragonite. I don't know what special move this guy has. I'm sure Bulbapedia knows. You can go check and then copy and paste it as if you knew already. But overall, I think the only thing you need to really be wary about if you're dealing with these Dragonites in a logical fashion is which one has a fire move. Because if you're being logical about this, you will probably be using an Ice type, or something with an Ice type move. And those are severely damaged by Fire type moves, as you most likely know. Anyway, looky here. Everett doesn't get the last hit on this Dragonite. It's Webster. Bet you didn't see that coming. One of the few things Webster actually gets to do in this little escapade. But certainly quite satisfying. Anyway, that's the bulk of his team out of the way. That's actually the only 3 Dragon types on his team. They're half his team, and they're all the same. Next up, he has an Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl is one of the coolest Pokemon ever, just FYI. It is a rock flying, I believe. Introduced in Gen 1. It's one of the fossil Pokemon, and it is extremely fast. It's like hella fast. Like, uncomfortably fast. And that means you are not outspeeding it without paralyzing it, or having an extremely fast Pokemon of your own. Like, say, maybe Electrode could outspeed it, depending on, like, the level difference, I don't know. But being part rock actually makes it vulnerable to a couple rather convenient things. It means you can bring in some sort of bulky water to take its hits and just kind of mow it down, because it is a fragile Pokemon as far as I'm aware. And then it's just kind of smooth sailing. Overall, I very rarely actually prey on the flying type for this guy. As you can see here, I'm just doing neutral effectiveness on him, and it's working out just fine. And of course, you can see, like, it's not weak by any means. It may be more speedy than attack-based, but it's certainly not weak. It's a force to be reckoned with. And that aerial ace, of course, has perfect accuracy, which means it will never miss. So, if you're using a double team strategy, too bad. Anyway, Aerodactyl goes out of the way, probably the least problematic of his team. I still had to use healing items a fair bit, but it was by no means stressful. And then his last Pokemon, Charizard, not actually part Dragon type, despite what you may have thought when you were a third grader on the playground. And Charizard has a very critical weakness, and that weakness is a quadruple weakness to Rock-type moves. Now, if you were really crafty and set up a Stealth Rock, which is a Rock-type entry hazard, you could cut off half of its HP right when it comes in. That's pretty devastating. But even if that's not the case, you can bring in a Pokemon with a Rock-type move, and assuming it doesn't get one-shotted like, unfortunately, Klaus was, that Rock-type move will probably just completely destroy it. Like, one shot, maybe two shots. And it is definitely a nice thing to have that crippling weakness. It's not nice when you're using a Charizard and you're using one in-game, because it's the best starter of the generation, but still, it's convenient for me. And unfortunately, this Charizard, I wasn't expecting it to be this difficult, but it actually managed to sweep everyone on the team except for Everett. I cut that bit out because it was shameful and disgraceful for my ancestry. And that means I basically have to use the same strategy that I used on the Dragonites, confuse it and whittle it down. And eventually worked out. And of course, get him down into the red, he activates Blaze, which powers up his Fire-type moves, making him dangerous in a last-ditch kind of effort there. But luckily, Everett was bulky enough to get through it, and that... Everett, I'm trying to have a climactic thing, stop learning moves. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Champion Lance in HeartGold. So check out the Crystal version after this commercial break. Alrighty, Crystal version. Now, Lance is a force to be reckoned with. Even in the admittedly rather easy original versions of these games, Lance can be a little bit crafty. He has a couple different strategies to go with. Here he has Gyarados with Rain Dance, rather than whatever that Gyarados was doing before, just using Dragon Pulse a bunch. Because in the second generation in Crystal, Waterfall is not a physical move, that does hamper Gyarados' ability to output strong Water-type moves that benefit its stat distribution. But Rain Dance plus Stab plus Surf is still dangerous, and you should keep it in mind. My Gyarados, I'm sure I've mentioned, is quadruple weak to electricity, so if you have a fast or bulky electric Pokemon, which basically constitutes 95% of electric Pokemon, will fall into one of those two categories, you should be able to take care of Gyarados fairly well. Let's just attack it with Everett, because that's just what I do against everything. And of course it is slower, because Everett doesn't have Dark Pulse, he's stuck with Feint Attack. Oh man, Super Repel, those are useful in this line of work. Yeah, it's overall just, I think Gyarados is less threatening thanks to, one, the lack of Intimidate, and two, just things that don't quite complement his stats as well. He does have Hyper Beam, as you just saw, and Hyper Beam is physical in this generation, which runs off his rather enormous physical attack stat. But Everett took it pretty darn well. I was surprised. And Hyper Beam, as you will see a bit later on with one of the other Pokemon he has, is actually very convenient when you are able to survive it, because it does require a recharge turn afterwards, and that leaves the opponent open to attack and open to decimation. Definitely convenient if you have a wall like this. Also lets you switch in another Pokemon on the rebound to get a revenge kill or something. Anyway, Dragonite number 1. And as I said before, 2 of the 3 Dragonites here are both level 47. And that's actually kind of annoying, because in HeartGold, with a 48 and a 49, you can actually tell the difference between the 2 and know which one is coming in, and know which element to expect from it. Here, you cannot, because 2 of them are basically aesthetically exactly the same. You just have to kind of bite the bullet and see what happens. Anyway, this Dragonite also has Hyper Beam. I think Hyper Beam is just overall much more popular on his team in Crystal. I'm not sure if that's just due to a lack of awesome stab moves. I guess Dragon Rush didn't exist back then. So we stuck with Hyper Beam. Of course, Confuse Ray combined with Hyper Beam, probably a nice thing, because it just means he won't be attacking very often, all things considered. Anyway, for future reference, this is the Dragonite with Thunder. He may send them out in a set order. He may always send the Thunder one out first. I don't know if that's true or not. It's entirely possible. Anyway, very glad that Thunder Wave didn't work. Don't know why it didn't work, but unlike in HeartGold, I don't have Synchronize, so I wouldn't have paralyzed that Dragonite that was going to die that same turn. It's worth keeping in mind. Anyway, here is the second Dragonite that is identical to the first Dragonite, and handle it in the same way, basically. Again, depending on what ice type you're trying to use against this guy, because you really should be using an ice type, it's possible that each of these Dragonites might have something dangerous. That Thunder one could take care of a Lapras that you might be using. And this guy, whatever he has, might be dangerous to whatever you're using. I don't even know what this guy has, and I don't care, because he's down. He went down exactly the same as the first one did. Anyway, switch things up a little bit. Rather than send in his third Dragonite immediately, he's sending in his Aerodactyl. Now, Aerodactyl, as far as I'm aware, isn't too different. In HeartGold, he does have the ability Pressure, which uses up your PvP quicker when you're attacking him, but I find that rarely comes into play. So, overall, he is still just an insanely fast dude. Now, I was hoping that I could use Frida to get in a whittling tactic here, just for some diversity. But unfortunately, because Aerodactyl is so fast and strong enough to do a lot of damage, I could only really get that Poison Powder in, and as you can see, that Wing Attack is actually doing more than the Moo Moo Milks will heal. So, Frida will not be using her patented whittling tactic in this fight. Thought maybe I could get lucky, get the Leech Seed in, but alas, no. We'll have to use some alternative tactic against Aerodactyl. What alternative tactic, might you ask? Well, I decided that, hey, why don't we actually try to prey on his weaknesses, and try Klaus, get in some surfing. Now, one thing about Klaus that comes up once in a while, but I never really realize, is that Klaus actually has pretty darn good physical defense. He resists that Wing Attack very well, and you're about to see him resist an even more powerful move really, really well as well. It's a lot of wells. Watch this Hyper Beam. You saw the devastation it was doing to Everett earlier. Klaus lives it. It does about 2/3 to Klaus. That's pretty darn good, and considering it's a recharge, I could hypothetically whittle the Aerodactyl if I needed to. But was not necessary. Finally managed to put Surf to good use despite it not preying on Klaus's better stats. Anyway, final Dragonite, and this is indeed the level 51. And of course Everett is really the only option. Isn't that just the darnest thing? I'm sure you've never seen that situation before. And like in HeartGold, this strongest Dragonite is, I believe, the one with the most dangerous Dragon-type move. Perhaps the only one in this one? I feel like the other guys might have had Twister or something, but as in HeartGold, this guy has Outrage. And as in HeartGold, it's pretty dangerous. Especially when it criticals. But because Everett's just that good, we will be able to commence the confusion tactic. I really need to think of a witty name for this tactic, because as of right now it's just Everett kind of doing his thing, whereas Frida has the patented Frida whittling tactic, and that's awesome. But yeah, it uses Outrage for a few turns, confuses itself, allows me to get back to full health, maybe get an attack in or two before it snaps out, and I can use Confuse Ray, and everybody is happy. Same strategy we've used against so many Dragonites and so many other Pokemon. It's strange, I did this whole playthrough to demonstrate gameplay differences between the two versions, see how strategies would change between the two. And yet my saving grace was exactly the same in both versions. There's some poetic thing in there, but I don't know what it is. Anyway, as before, finishing off with Charizard. Charizard's, oh, I'm out of Confuse Rays. That's unfortunate. I am running out of PP all over the place. Charizard, is dangerous. Like, it's not Dragonite dangerous, but it's worth looking at seriously, especially if you're using an Ice type, as I mentioned before. And it's actually fairly durable. From what I understand, it has the exact same base stats as Typhlosion. And I think they're all fairly well-rounded, so it can take whatever hits you're sending out with modest alrightness and deal fairly decent damage the whole time. But what are we gonna do? We're gonna have to get through this guy, like, without Confuse Ray. I'm scared. I'm very scared. Now, hypothetically, I could revive Klaus and see if he could learn or live a flamethrower. It's a viable strategy. I don't know if he would, and he would probably, like, lose all of his, it'd probably still do 2/3, and I wouldn't be able to do a whole lot. I might be able to get one Surf in. So Everett is the way to go. Oh god, we're running low on PP. We are running very, very low on PP. Luckily I have Ethers if necessary, but we're running low. And this is what it comes down to. No fancy tactics, no cleverness, just a bunch of lemonades and a bunch of patience. Looks like he isn't going to be using a full restore or anything of the sort. So, it's one more hit, and he's down. But at this point, I was playing extremely cautiously. I didn't want a spare critical to go horribly awry, so I used the extra lemonade. I didn't want some sort of horrible speed tie thing to happen. Took the extra turn, and finally, with the last feint attack, this Charizard is going down. Came down to the wire there. Last Pokemon, almost out of PP. Almost out of lemonades, you had like 30 left, whatever. And so that was Lance and Crystal. Very, very much the same. Check out the finale after this commercial break. Well, that was an ordeal. Took a good deal of patience, but finally over and done with. We are the champions of the Indigo League. Here to greet us is Professor Oak. Hi there. You're Professor Oak. Let's not. Let's get, yeah, Lance. Let's get out of here. And this is where I will leave you guys for the time being. This playthrough will return after a brief break for another series in order to take on the post-game and a whole new set of challenges. But for now, enjoy the Hall of Fame and enjoy the credits.